In order to answer these three questions, you need risk assessments. It is required. Organizations applying in New York are required to upload their risk assessment, whatever it is, even if it's a risk assessment that you did yourself. It really collects the information, should evaluate what the risks are, and make recommendations to enhance deterrence, detection, denial, and damage mitigation. Remember, I've said those words before. And the recommendations include the investments that you're asking for the federal government to help support. First, threat. What is a threat? Now, there are Jewish organizations that have received direct threats. For example, the synagogues in Riverdale, that the police and FBI arrested individuals plotting to blow them up. Not everyone is so lucky, so to speak. You should make reference to, if you don't have specific threats, make reference to generalized threats to similar organizations. For example, there was a Manhattan bomb plot where people wanted to blow up synagogues in Manhattan. Make a reference to those, and then explain how your synagogue, for example, is similar. If you're a school, there is the attack on a school in Toulouse, and in Toulouse, France, and that again, what did that teach you? That an attack on a school in Toulouse, France, during assembly time, when kids were coming to school, is something that could be repeated here in New York. Many of the people who do professional risk assessments can say that and do say in your risk assessment that you're at high risk of terrorist attacks due to your ideology, beliefs, or missions. If you've had bomb threats, hate crimes, graffiti, list them. Dates, police reports, and insurance claims are very important in this. It's a key element that distinguishes one nonprofit from another. And finally, address anything else that's mentioned in risk assessments, police reports, or insurance claims. Vulnerability. Now, vulnerability is exactly what it says. What are the gaps that a terrorist could take advantage of? And these gaps come from your previously conducted risk assessment. 3 varieties: 1, physical; 2, procedures; 3, training. Now, by physical I mean the locks on your doors are poor, that the windows on the first floor are not hardened, and in the event of a bomb, the glass would cause many injuries. Those are physical types of vulnerabilities. Procedures. The most common procedure is no one locks the door, that there's no one screening visitors into the building. So a vulnerability assessment, a risk assessment, can come in and say the access control procedures are inadequate. Training has, a risk assessment could say that a particular organization has no training, has not given training to the teachers in terms of evacuation or active shooter response. All of these are vulnerabilities. In these 3 categories, you're going to have a lot more in vulnerabilities, or you're likely to have a lot more vulnerabilities than you can fix with the $75,000 allotted. So what you're going to have to do is to take those vulnerabilities and prioritize them, which is spelled wrong. You have to identify high probability, high consequence events, and you should focus on terrorism vulnerabilities more than anti-crime. In other words, there are some things that are good for stopping a computer from walking off from your facility. It's much more important to look at what the judges are looking for are solving issues that relate to terrorism. Potential consequences. Again, what would happen if there's a terrorist attack against your building? Could you function, provide services to your constituencies without the building? The example that I've given a couple times, there was a school that burned down last month in New Jersey. They were fairly lucky because a local community college stepped in and said, we have extra classrooms. Would that happen with your group? Probably not. It would really challenge almost any organization to function without their building. We found that out in Sandy, after Sandy, when many yeshivot were wiped out. How would the attack affect your constituency? You have to think about the direct and secondary impacts. Not only would it have psychological effects, but also, if you didn't have a building, your parents, the parent population of a school might not be able to get to work. Assets, could they be replaced easily? Example, your financial records, your donors, your lists, all of those kind of things, and you should thoroughly address potential negative effects on your organization's asset system and or network if damaged, destroyed, or disrupted by a terrorist attack. Okay, now we're back, we're to the fourth section, target hardening, because now you have a prioritized list of your vulnerabilities. It's time to turn around and figure out what kinds of hardware and training will enhance deterrent, detection, denial, and damage mitigation. And again, strategically, you should address the high probability, high consequence vulnerabilities first. Don't address relatively minor problems if the barn door is wide open. The example that I give is a very, very high profile target, which anyone would be would put on its list of targets. They had documentation that bad guys had viewed them as a target, so they were really high on those scores. But when it came to target hardening, the building managers had gone to a vendor, and a vendor recommended that they install chemical and biological sniffers into the building in order to detect chemical or biological attacks. Well, yes, those kinds of sensors are eligible on the authorized equipment list, but when the judges saw that, their reaction was, your front door is wide open. Anyone can walk in or out. Until you start addressing those kinds of simple issues, don't go and spend tens of thousands of dollars of governmental money on things that are low likelihood. How's this scored? This is worth 8 of the 40 points. So you have to provide a thorough description of how the proposed target hardening activity will mitigate the identified risks listed in your risk assessment. Now, and make sure that your choices focus on prevention of or protection against the risk of a terrorist attack. So what you should do is to list every category. You're required to list the AEL, the authorized equipment list number of everything that you want to submit, and explain which vulnerability this investment, this equipment matches up to, and how this will mitigate the identified risks through the 4 magic words: deterrence, detection, deny people access, or damage mitigation. And that's how you get the points. Training is allowable. It has to be directly related to a listed vulnerability. For example, there can be training on access control procedures, security awareness, terrorism awareness. All these things are eligible in New York. You can put down for training an active shooter response is very much in focus these days. But in New York, successful grantees can have, for example, a $5,000 training budget, but once you're a successful grantee, you're going to have to check with New York State DHSES to pre-clear training expenditures, because there are people out there who may not be considered qualified to do such training. Now we transfer from the actual